Teddy, darling, you gonna join me? You sit up.
Oh,
That's wonderful. Thank you. Would you like to help introduce Pet Talk today? Are you going to say anything today?
I think that's a no.
It does seem like a no, doesn't it? He's usually very chatty. Teddy,
Yeah.
darling, do you remember what we do? We say Pet Talk. Yes, that's right. Hello and welcome to Pet Talk with me, Anna. And what's your name? Can you tell everybody your name? What's your name? Tell everybody your name. There we are. It's Teddy. And we are joined today by our wonderful guest who is. Do you remember who I said we're introducing today? Do you remember? Do you remember who he? That's right, Roger Meacock. Well done, Teddy. And welcome to you, Roger.
I feel like I should be barking now, yeah.
No, that's not required. That's Teddy's language. But yes, he's usually very chatty on these calls. So
Yeah, he realizes I'm a vet. I might hold him to task later on for
yes, I
things he
suspect
says.
that may mean that he's a little bit more reluctant. That's very
Fear.
actually is an interesting way to get started on this conversation because I asked you whether you'd be willing to talk about allergies
Right.
because it seems to me that so many dogs have got allergies
Yeah.
and it's like it's almost like a normal thing for a dog to have allergies in the same way that it's almost normal for a human to have allergies. So, what's going on, Roger? First of all, what causes allergies? Is there one cause? Are there lots of causes? What's going on with allergies?
Yeah, it can be an element of multifactorial to it, but the biggest one by far is commercial pet foods. You know, dogs and cats are both carnivores, and we should be feeding them raw meat and bone, and that's it. We don't, and offal. We don't need to be feeding them anything else. Half the things that people are feeding are completely unnecessary, like fruit and veg, and then they pre-grind it, which no dog in the wild goes to the pre-ground shop. They hunt and kill whole beasts, or they scavenge whole beasts and they crunch it up and they use their teeth and they use their jaws, and that keeps their teeth clean and gives them satisfaction from that whole chewing and crunching and gnawing process, and that helps with endorphins, which helps them keep them happy, and their gut is then happy because the skin and allergies is really a window into the gut, and you will never get the skin right unless you get the gut healed. And then ears are very often a window into the skin because you don't get the same airflow over ears or down ears that you get over the rest of the body, and so you get a concentration and a sort of, yeah, concentration is probably the best word, of symptoms in the ears as well. So then you get sort of the scratching at the ears and then the gunkiness in the ears and infection in the ears because the skin and the ears, they're all both organs of excretion. They're pushing out cerumen and things through the skin, and when they're toxic, that's what they do. And then of course, because what they're shoving out through the skin is toxic, it creates inflammation, so they become itchy and hot and inflamed. So number one thing is commercial pet food, the top of which is kibbles.
So, is there a way to come back from this? I mean, Teddy has had allergies since we discovered he had allergies just after he turned one. In fact, the whole thing started. What started it was he got some grass seeds in his paws and they gave him antibiotics. And the next thing we knew, he was on a perpetual cycle of licking paws. And it took, I reckon, from the end of July of his first year right through to October, we were seeing the vet almost every other week. And it was antibiotics, come off the antibiotics. He seems okay, round again. And then finally, steroids. And it was when he got the ear infections, as you said,
Yeah.
that suddenly the vet said, "Well, do you know what? I think we're dealing with allergies." And he had blood tests, and I know that blood tests are a bit controversial. But one of the things that the blood tests pointed to was penicillin, the very thing that he'd been having.
Sure.
So he seemed to be fine up until they gave him penicillin. And I just went straight to the diet, me cooking for him, because at the time I was worried about raw, because I thought, well, if allergies are linked with the immune system, what I didn't want to risk anything.
Sure.
And he was absolutely fine. But I'm just wondering, is there a way of, let's, for lack of a better word, correct the issue so
Yeah.
he doesn't have to stick to this diet? And for anyone who is in this situation and is already feeding their animal, um, let's say raw or cooked, but not commercial pet food, is there
Yeah.
a way back from this?
Yeah. Feed food properly. Feed raw meaty bones. That's it. We don't have to do any more for them. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad information on the raw side and a lot of unnecessary ingredients being added to raw meat and bone. I mean, the commercial raw feeders do it because if you add in fruit and veg, it sounds nicer and it's cheaper because fruit and veg are cheaper than meat on the whole. Um, but the ingredients aren't necessary because plant material contains anti-nutrients, and everybody focuses on the antioxidants, on what they see as nutrients, and they completely ignore the fact that there's a whole bank of anti-nutrients within fruit and veg, which is their plant's defense against being eaten. So things like sweet potato, spinach, we get lots of oxalates, which then the body can't deal with, and then they settle out in the body and they cause inflammation. There's hormone disruptors, there's digestive disruptors. Oxalates is one of those as well. It disrupts the calcium metabolism. So, yeah, we just need to get back to feeding the right ingredients and let the gut heal. So, when people tell me that they've had tests done to find out what the dog's allergic to me, that's not really important. It is and it isn't. The main thing it's confirming is we've got a gut problem. We've got a gut which is leaky, which is allowing things to cross it, which shouldn't do. And the way to heal the gut is to feed the correct diet, and then the gut will recover. It doesn't always happen overnight. It can take a while, but it will do. But it does take being strict. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who've been feeding raw, maybe for some time, who are feeding raw in a slightly incorrect way, and they just don't want to hear that what they're doing isn't correct. But unfortunately, that's the bottom line. And it's probably a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have been quite so hard line about it myself. Um, but I listened to or watched a video on YouTube by a doctor called Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and he calls himself the plant-free MD, and he has been carnivore for 20 years, and he promotes the carnivore diet as a way of healing human health. And he did a video called "Plants Are Trying to Kill You." And once you've seen the title, you can't really very easily scroll past it, or I couldn't anyway. And so I watched it, and it made an awful lot of sense to me. And there are anti-nutrients in vegetables at levels above what we worry about, whether they've got pesticides or herbicides as contaminants on the outside about. So people are routinely and rigorously cleaning their fruit and veg to get rid of what might have been sprayed on the outside, and completely forgetting or oblivious of the levels that are actually higher of anti-nutrients inside. And one of the ones that stuck in my head because it was so high was Brussels sprouts that contain 153 known carcinogens. So, and they're all part of the brassica family, and they have all originated from the wild mustard. So that's your cabbages, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, so they're all part and parcel of the same thing. And yet those are things that people say, oh, my dog loves it. It's like, well, yeah, they do. They love the crunch because they often feed them raw, which is, again, there's getting no nutrients from it, which you could argue that then saves them to a certain degree from the anti-nutrients. If you can't get the nutrients out, you can't get the anti-nutrients out as well. But they're still not doing any good for the dog's digestive system. And if anything, they're neutralizing the acid in the stomach that they need to digest the raw meat and bone. So, the diet needs to be really fundamentally changed and, really strict. It's a bit like people who get, to hear about kids who got peanut allergies. Once they've got a peanut allergy, they've only got to sniff a peanut and some of them will be in an anaphylactic reaction. So thankfully, the dogs on the whole aren't getting that degree of an anaphylactic reaction, but it just is an indicator of actually how little you need of something which causes an allergy to set that whole system off again. And that's how the immune system is supposed to function. We meet infections and we then create antibodies to them, but we also create memory cells. And the whole point of a memory cell is it gears up very quickly as soon as it gets the sniff of the infection again, so that the antibody levels gear up very, very quickly and the animals or we are protected. So if you think about it, once we've got an allergy to a foreign protein that's crossing the gut barrier, we don't have to have a lot of it again to gear up that immune reaction and then create that all the allergic symptoms again. And then it can take a while for those antibody levels to settle down and for it all to settle down again. So yeah, it is a problem. Won't get away from it. It is a major problem, but it is primarily caused by the diet, and it doesn't necessarily happen just as a result of what we're feeding now. It can happen across the generations as well. So you get people who'll say, "Oh, I've been raw feeding my dog and I still get problems," and you go, "Well, if the parents and the grandparents weren't raw fed, there might be epigenetic changes that have passed down through that can cause problems, in your dog." And that was proven in the 1930s by a chap called Pottinger, who did some experiments with cats. And he found that it took 3 generations of correct feeding to correct the adverse effect of 1 generation of bad feeding. So, if you think how long commercial pet foods have been fed, and sort of the average lifespan of dogs, we are well beyond 3 generations probably now of feeding on the whole badly. And so we've got quite a way to go of correct feeding before we fully unwind all those adverse effects that have sort of crept on down the generations through the epigenetics. So it's not a simple, oh, if you feed raw, you're going to be 100% right. You'll be a lot better, but you won't necessarily be right because there may be some epigenetic things that have filtered on through. But it's like everything's a normal distribution curve. So there'll be individuals will be affected to varying degrees. So some will get away and change the food and they'll be 100% and they'll be great. And then others will be really strict and it won't be for the 3rd generation until that comes completely right. So, there's a spectrum of effect and there's a spectrum of response to actually doing the right thing as well. So it can be very frustrating. Absolutely.
It's interesting. I do remember now you mentioned that study, reading about it and thinking, wow. And it was very quick, actually. But when we know that gut microbiomes are, how can I put this, shared within families.
Yes.
And so it makes sense that 1 generation will be reflected in another generation and another generation, because we do seem to share our gut microbiomes. And I did have on this channel a lovely lady who's done amazing research on the gut microbiome of animals and specifically dogs and horses.
Yeah.
And she was very clear that the gut microbiome of dogs is especially compromised and has been especially compromised, even more so in the last 4 years.
Sure.
And she was explaining how we always think that our gut microbiome is affected by dogs, but actually it's the other way around.
No, it's both ways. It always goes both ways. We're all interlinked via the environment and everything. And, there's a microbiome in the gut, but there's a microbiome on the skin. There's a microbiome in the ears, and that's why cesareans aren't a good idea, because that seeding of the microbiome in the baby happens through natural childbirth. Um, so it's much wider. And I remember actually seeing a study on humanized mice, and it was one exposure to aspartame, the natural um, artificial sweetener. One exposure to aspartame caused depression 3 generations down in the mice, in these humanized mice. So, we know. This isn't just Pottinger and his cats. If it's actually looked for, it is found in other species in other ways as well. So, we've got to sort of think on a much wider scale than perhaps we tend to do, and recognize, that there are implications beyond just ourselves or our current pets, but also future generations potentially as well, and as a result of past generations too. And obviously humans, we've got a very relatively long generational gap. If the average person lives to 67 or 72 or whatever it is these days, then we've got quite long gaps of generations. But if you think about dogs, and their lifespan is coming down, then after 30 years, we might have had 3 or 4 generations of them. So they're we're really struggling then to reverse that round. So it's I think with the proper raw feeding and getting the microbiome right, which you can do through giving probiotics and even sort of fecal seeding and things like that to reseed and reestablish the gut microbiome. You can help things. We know what can help, but it's yeah, it's not always the quick fix that we would like it to be. And yeah, it becomes an ongoing issue. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're talking about long fixes, but you are involved with quantum veterinary medicine, which I'm not suggesting is a quick fix, but it's certainly exciting. And I'd like you to tell us about what that is and the various um, tools in your toolkit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was qualified as a conventional vet to begin with. I had no interest really in anything alternative. And to cut a long story short, I sort of, in trying to prove that alternative stuff didn't work, I ended up jumping the fence and being very much on the other side and deciding that there are much better ways of treating the body. And then, really, through a process of self-education and reading around the whole subject of physiology, I just realized that actually biophysics is far more important in terms of how our body is organized and regulated and maintained than biochemistry. And yet, virtually every medical course will be based on the biochemical paradigm. And, this is where it's fundamentally going wrong. So, um, once you sort of realize that even physics we're taught at school is wrong. Everybody learnt about atoms with shells of electrons around them, and you get a certain number of electrons in shells and all the rest of it. And that determines where they are in the periodic table. Once you realize that actually electrons aren't solid things, that they actually materialize and dematerialize according to quantum physics, and they're a probability of existence, and really a function of particles and waves rather than anything sort of more solid that we like to think of my desk or something, then then once you realize everything is frequency, it makes far more sense to interfere or to help the body to manage itself as a frequency being by using frequency. At least you're then speaking the same language, and we know that frequency is very powerful and can be very influential even at very low power and at great distance as well, which has huge implications for the EMFs and 5G and everything, and it's not just 5G, it's all the EMFs that have come before it as well. So, and so that then you realize things aren't just linear either. Biology isn't a linear subject. Just, when it comes to EMFs, distance is your friend up to a point. But if you've got the wrong frequency, even at a very far distance, it can still influence. And obviously, when it comes to artificial EMFs, that's not a good influence. But the flip side of that is if you're using natural frequencies and you're using them correctly, then you can do really good stuff like Raymond Rife did, and bioresonance and Reiki at a distance and all those sorts of frequency things. So, the whole energy system, if you like, has got a duality to it. And on one hand, I'm trying to use what I know about frequency to help the body to heal itself, because I never heal anything. All I can do is help the body heal itself. So in the way that I'm trying to help, there are often unintended consequences from the use of frequency in other ways, like the telecommunications, that they're trying to suppress because they don't want all the litigious backlash that would happen from it, and also the resistance to continue with it. And it's it becomes a battle between economics and science and agendas and all the rest of it. So it's a complicated world, but it's ultimately governed by frequency, and that's so that's sort of how I got into it. And one of the first devices I came across was a Russian electronic biofeedback device called SCENA, which stands for Self-Controlling Energy Neuroadaptive Regulation. So it's an acronym as well as the name of the device and the therapy itself. So I went on the very first training course that the Russians did in the UK in 1997, and it never really been used on animals before that, but they told me they couldn't think of a reason why it couldn't. That was good enough for me. So I got one and adapted the techniques that I'd been taught how to treat people, and just adapted them to treating animals, and decided I was going to get better results doing that. And so I started doing that, and then I added in bioresonance. So again, a bit like homeopathy, but computerized. So whereas homeopathy might have 3,000 to 4,000 remedies in the whole repertory, I've got 227,000 remedies, which are vibrations taken from parts of the body, from enzymes, from essential flowers, from gems, from elements, from traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, everything and anything across the board has the ability to be used as a frequency, and can, if it's correct, can be helpful. So so that's how I got into bioresonance, really. I just found the whole thing fascinating, as you can probably imagine. Yeah, just went from there, and then more recently added in wave genetics, which is again another technology developed by a Russian called Dr. Peter Gurayev, who was nominated for a Nobel Prize for Medicine in October 2020 and mysteriously died a month later. And yeah, so it's, that changes our understanding of DNA beyond the conventional in a significant way, that just shows all this, DNA manipulation, whether it's via RNA or CRISPR editing or whatever, however they're trying to do it, they really don't understand what exactly they're messing with, and the implications of what that might have, on other levels.
So I want to take you back to the scanner, because you've introduced us to three very novel items for most people.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to take you back to the scanner, and perhaps you can explain a little bit more about how that works and give us an example of the type of thing that might be helpful for.
Okay. So Alexander Karasev was the lead scientist in the team that developed it. And in the former USSR, everybody who showed any aptitude for anything was, put in special academies for the good of the state, obviously. And so if it, we saw it, all the athletes and the sports people, they got, pushed and shoved and given whatever else to help them make them better as well. Obviously, Alexander was a bright kid, and so he was pushed academically. And there was an outbreak of food poisoning in his home village or hometown, and his sister died. And back in the former USSR, they didn't have the sort of the pharmaceutical penetration that they've got there now and that we've got obviously here. So they didn't really have a lot of treatment options. And he thought there must be a better way of being able to treat the body that didn't rely on having to have pharmaceuticals or anything else. And he obviously recognized that the body was electric. He did a joint degree in medicine and electronics, and then realized that because the nervous system works on very sort of electrical principles, there must be a way that you can communicate with it and potentially influence it to speed up the healing process. And that was really what his objective was. So then he realized that if you are going to speak the language of the body, you better have the right waveform if you're going to use currents. So he built a component, and how you do this, I have no idea. I wouldn't have the foggiest where to start. But he built a component so that the signal coming out looked like a nerve impulse on an oscilloscope. So it's not a square wave or a sine wave or a triangle wave or one of these standard electronic waveforms. It actually looks like a nerve impulse. And then he realized that wherever you get pathology in the body, you get changes in the electrical properties of the skin. So the skin becomes a window into the body at deeper in, physically deeper in. And so when the device measures and finds an area on the skin that isn't reading as it should do, it puts a signal into the body to amplify the pathological signal. So that the brain goes, oh, bloody hell, didn't realize it was that bad, better do something about it, floods the area with chemicals called neuropeptides, which are simply proteins produced in parts of the nervous system, and they mediate the whole healing process. So they'll switch on, switch off genes, incorporate, call in stem cells, call in whatever needs to do to heal the body. So the response to the signal going in is to address the pathology, which changes the parameters that the device is measuring on the skin. And so you end up in a feedback loop where every signal changes the response, which changes the signal, which changes the response. And you go round and round in circles. And effectively what the body is then doing is controlling its own treatment in real time. So each individual is treated as an individual, and each placement of the device is treated as a novel situation. So it's not my idea of what a treatment should be. It's what I've got to identify where to place it. But beyond that, it's then a two-way conversation, if you like, between the device and the body to decide how to get it to heal. And so it will speed up the healing process 2 to 3 times the normal speed.
So, listening to you, I'm automatically thinking that this would be excellent for the treatment of inflammation of any kind. Is that correct?
It's got an 80 to 90% success rate of treating all conditions, of which 2/3 will be a cure. And that's in any body system. So anything from strokes to heart attacks to sports injuries, respiratory, digestive, fertility, urinary tract, you name it, they've used it for it with a very high degree of success. So, for example, if they can get to a stroke victim within 24 hours, preferably within 12, they can get nigh on, and if they're using supporting medications at the same time or whatever else they might need to use, but they will get 100% recovery in 7 days.
Wow, that is so exciting and impressive. What do you find in your practice that you're using it for mostly?
Yeah, because I'm most of my veterinary practice, I'm mostly treating dogs and horses. So predominantly I'm using it for musculoskeletal injuries, so performance injuries or the dogs, I see quite a few dogs where they've been diagnosed with a cruciate injury. I'm not sure they all have them, But very often it's diagnosed if there's a hind leg stifle injury, then it gets lumped in the cruciate ligament box. And yet I will, there are other ligaments and there are other reasons why lameness can occur and why that joint can be affected by it. So I tend to treat a lot of dogs for those sorts of things, or a bit of pain in the back or old age. It's good for things like that. Horses, ligament, muscle, tendon injuries. You can use it for maintenance as well. So obviously prevention is better than cure. Um, so yeah, and because you've got the meridian system running obviously over the body, and because it's working on electrical principles, and because acupuncture points have got lower electrical resistance, you do end up doing sort of a systemic balancing as well, especially if you're working down the spine, um, in that way. So it works on multiple levels. It's primarily, you think about it, just working where it is with the skin. But a number of times I've treated, well, people obviously, because animals can't give me the same feedback, but I'm treating, for example, somebody's lower back, and they say, "Oh, I can feel that in my wrist," and you'll go, "Okay, so what did you do there?" And they'll say, "Well, I sort of fell over and I sprained it, or I broke it, or something happened to it." And you say, "Well, are you still having problems with it?" And they'll say, "Yes." And you go, "Well, you might not anymore." It can wander around the body and do different things. And I've had, people want to feel what it feels like. So you put it on their hand for a few minutes. And then I've had people phone up and go, "Oh, my hiatus hernia has just stopped." Or, or I can feel that going to my back, so it will sort of wander off and do what it needs to do. Um, and there's, as I say, what any of the treatments that I do are doing is helping the body to heal itself. So the success of that treatment is dependent on, obviously, good nutrition, good lifestyle, all the things that give the ability, the vital force to make that change. And obviously what I'm doing will help to push it in that direction, but ultimately the body has still got to heal itself. But it's exciting. Most people obviously have got quite good energy in that direction, especially if they're interested in doing what I do. Then they're probably already thinking better in other ways than a lot of people. So we know on the whole we get a very good response. And because you're non-invasive, and because you get, when I'm treating the dogs and the horses, when you're getting the neuropeptides released, you also get endorphins released. So if anybody's got horses and they've seen how a horse looks when it's been twitched or sedated, well, that sometimes happens while I'm treating the horses. You get that sedative effect, and dogs will often lie down and go to sleep while I'm treating them, depending on whereabouts it is, obviously. But a lot of them will just relax and enjoy it, and make good progress.
So let's come. There's two other things I'm thinking about, because I don't know what it is, but I have never heard of so many dogs as I have done in the last year developing issues with their eyes, glaucoma, cataracts. It seems that all of a sudden, I mean, maybe it's just a coincidence, but I seem to have suddenly become aware of lots of dogs with eye problems. Would this be a good treatment for that?
It depends what's causing it, because I mean, there's quite a lot going on in the sky, um, and obviously it's hit the mainstream media finally that the government is talking about putting stuff into the sky for geoengineering and all the rest of it. Which, if anybody had mentioned it in the past, everything got poo-pooed, and we were told to be, we were conspiracy theorists and the rest of it. So, if there is more of that going on, then that could explain potentially what's going on there. Um, it's difficult to know, isn't it? What's causing it? Um, so it's the same with everything. If it helps to understand what's driving something, because I say to people, it's like if I'm trying to treat someone who's got a headache, but they're still banging their head against the wall, I can give them the best treatment in the world. and it might temporarily stop the headache for a millisecond, but if the next time they bang that head on the wall, it's gonna happen again. So, there is an element of, we've got to, as well as do treatment, it's a homeopathic principle of obstacle to cure, and you've got to get rid of the obstacle to cure and stop doing what's causing the problem if there is something that you can be identified as to what's causing it, because the definition of madness is to do the same thing and expect a different result. So, if it is something that's being sprayed in the sky and the powers that be are still spraying it in the sky, yeah, I can probably give some temporary relief, and there may be some eye drops and things that will help maybe create a little bit more resistance to doing that, or you can give some sort of homeopathic formula to try and support the eyes. But ultimately, you still got that ongoing attack on them. It's difficult, and that's not just doing my stuff. It's even with conventional treatments. You still got the same issue. Obviously, suppressive treatments from pharma tend to sort of be, I say, far more suppressive on the symptoms, so they might appear to be successful or more successful than some of the alternative options. But ultimately, when you suppress symptoms, all you do is drive the problem deeper and move it somewhere else. So they aren't always, there might be a temporary respite while you get on top of it in other ways, but they aren't a good long-term solution to chronic disease, which is why we have an epidemic of chronic disease on the veterinary side as well as on the human side, obviously.
So, okay, so this is the wonderful scanner.
Yeah,
Um, but you also mentioned bioresonance, which
yeah,
I find fascinating because you're talking about using the frequency of natural things like crystals and plants, etc.,
yeah,
which is the principle of that we would use in homeopathy and even as flower essences, etc.
yes.
Um, how does that work? Tell us a little bit more detail about that. And again, how would it be helpful in different contexts?
I suppose it depends what your view of what homeopathy is doing and whether, on what level the healing energy, if you like, is held. Is homeopathy the result of the material that you've diluted and succussed and gone through the process to make? Is it actually the product that you've actually used to make that, physically make that dilution? Or is it the process of doing that dilution actually links you through to another level of the information of the healing behind that remedy? And I think it's the latter. So, and that's why we can use sort of computerized systems and electronics effectively to do a similar process. So when when I'm when I, if for argument's sake I've got arnica in my bioresonance kit, it hasn't been prepared by diluting it and obviously pouring it into the computer. It's it's captured the essence, it's captured the vibration of that, but I think that vibration isn't necessarily the healing bit. I think the vibration is the link to the information behind the plant that has got the healing information there. So you're dealing with information and links to it rather than the curative product itself, if you like. So if you think about it a little bit like a QR code, you can have a series of dots and things there, but the product isn't the QR code. The QR code is simply a link to a load of information behind it. When you scan it, it'll tell you what the product is, it'll tell you the price, it'll tell you the wholesale price, it'll tell you how much is in stock, all, where it's come from, all those different bits of information. But they're sort of enclosed within the QR code, but they're actually information held at a level behind it. And I think remedies, homeopathic remedies, and then the remedies that are used in the bioresonance kit are doing exactly the same. So what you're doing when you give a remedy is you're linking the body to the information behind it, and it's the dilution determines at what level of information, how loud, if you like, it's that link is, and so that's how I see how it works. So it's it's the great thing about it is I can use multiple remedies in a formula. So like I've got like an osteoarthritis remedy or formula, and it might have 60 or something different remedies in it, which I've taken from the common homeopathic remedies you would use, the acupuncture points you would normally needle, other parts of of parts of the body or cartilage or joint, and made remedies out of those things, and with instructions to how the body should use that remedy and use that information. So it's a complex formula, and at multiple potency as well, so the body can choose what it needs when it needs to take it, because the potency you need in an acute situation is different from the potency you need in a chronic, and there's a sliding scale in between. So if you provide everything on that scale, the body chooses what it needs when. So it's just, it's a very different way of working, and then you can use it for distant stuff as well, as long as I've got someone's name, date of birth and address, and if I've got a witness sample like some hair or a photograph or something, then I can actually send the treatment to them. So again, they are a link to that information. So with bioresonance, all I'm doing is linking links, if you like, and creating a chain that links that individual with the healing information. And I'm sort of, I don't know, I'm the wholesaler in the middle, if you like, or the coordinator. So it's a very different way of thinking, but it's no different to how someone who's doing Reiki will say they can send distance treatment to distance, and I say to people, it's no different from listening to the radio. If you want to listen to Radio 4 or Radio 2 or Radio 1, whatever it is, you tune your dial into that station. Well, all I'm doing with the bioresonance is I'm sending you that program, if you like, but instead of you tuning into it and selecting it, I'm selecting you. So it's not a very different principle from how that works. And we know from Rupert Sheldrake's work with morphological fields that twins will have that bond between them. So distance communication and awareness is very real. So all I'm doing is just hooking into those things that we don't yet fully understand, but we know that they're there, and just finding ways of linking different healing modalities to them to create that, to pass on the information that body needs to heal itself. And that body has still got to have the life force and the ability to do that, otherwise it won't work.
Well, it's interesting because, it seems that the common denominator for all of this is information.
Yeah.
And energy becoming the information that brings the healing in. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking about flower essences and how that is a dilution of a dilution of a dilution. But it begins with putting the plant material in water, because water has memory, and
yes.
mix the plant, and then you dilute it, because it's the water is passing on that information. So it doesn't matter that there's a dilution, a huge dilution, because it's the memory that's being passed on, the memory of the information that's being passed on.
Yeah, but it's more complicated than that, because when you succuss the water, you actually fracture it, if you like. You make it into smaller domains. And so each domain of that water has a copy of the information that you've put into it. And that's why when you dilute it more, it becomes more powerful, because you have more copies within the same unit volume of water to pass on the message. And that is why ultra dilution works. And that's why dilution is more powerful. The more highly diluted it is, the more powerful the remedy is, which goes against the conventional thinking, where they're just thinking purely in terms of concentration. They're not thinking in terms of what you're. So what you could get that water, and you could dilute. You could put your flour in it, and then you could dilute it. But if you don't succuss it, you're not going to break the water up, so you won't get any more domains. So all you are doing, that would be the conventional dilution that the doctors and vets who are stuck in the conventional paradigm would consider as a dilution. But once you add the succussion into it, you're then creating all these smaller domains within the water, each of which is a copy of the information you've put in. And that's why ultra dilution makes the remedy more powerful.
And that comes back to information, and so
Precisely.
that brings us to the last thing you mentioned, which is wave genetics.
Yeah.
This, when I first heard you speak about this, had me spellbound. So tell us about wave genetics.
Well, again, it's sort of based on that same principle of information behind. And so in this case, it's DNA. DNA is, conventionally they think that's what is our blueprint, but it isn't, because DNA only codes for proteins. And I'm not just a blob of protein. I've got fats, and all other bits to me as well. And I'm not just a blob. I've got a form. It may not be pretty, but I've got a form. But it's there. So there's an information that structures, the structure, if you like, that shapes the structure. And so there is another layer of information behind the DNA that links to. And that link is strong when we're a baby, obviously, because the DNA hasn't been corrupted. It is that link at its best. And as we get older, there's mutations and lifestyle and pollution and all these other things that interfere with our DNA. And when it replicates, the things slightly change. And so it's a bit like detuning a radio station. So that link becomes a little bit fuzzy, and then the pathology happens and it gets maintained, because that fuzziness of the detuning never gets reversed. So what Peter realized was, when a photograph is taken, we have that informational link within our image. We cannot see it. We don't recognize it for what it is, but it's there. It's a bit like, the Ready Brek guy on the TV adverts. He glows red in the dark, or the police trying to find the criminal in the dark from the helicopter, and they can see the thermal imaging. So our eyes can't see it, but there is other information there that allows that image to be seen. And so it's similar really with the information behind our DNA. So a photograph will capture not only what we see visually within that narrow spectrum of radiation, but also there's this informational link behind it. And by using a photograph of somebody when they were a baby or very young, before they became ill or had an injury or whatever, you can reconnect, you can use the photograph to capture the link to their DNA information at its best. And then by turning it into sound and listening to it, it reconnects the body with that informational link. And so the body has the information to rejuvenate itself. Whether it's capable of fully doing it comes down to life force, what lifestyle is, what the diet is, or how much energy it takes to do it, and how much energy is available and all the rest of it. So, and which certain systems the body will prioritize in what it needs to do. So, so that's the basis of it, really. It's reconnecting the body to its original blueprint. But as with any blueprint, anybody who's been involved in house building will tell you, you can have the best design in the world and the best materials in the world, but if the builder ain't any good, it's going to fall down. So that's where it's not a substitute for poor nutrition or poor lifestyle. It's it is an instruction ultimately to the body, and it's up to the body then to be able to do it. But some of the testimonials that I've seen are phenomenal. And in Russia, obviously, they recognize that siblings are very closely linked. So if they've got a child born with a congenital disorder such as Down syndrome or cystic fibrosis or any other congenital disorder, if they have a sibling or parent who hasn't got that, they can use a photograph of them because it's close enough to the DNA to use their informational link to then help the body to develop without that congenital disorder or with significantly reduced symptoms of it.
So, how do you decide which of these modalities you're going to use when somebody comes in to see you? You've got three seemingly miraculous options,
Yeah.
each one more miraculous, it seems, than the other. So, how do you decide? Is it going to be the scanner? Is it going to be bioresonance? Is it going to be the wave genetics?
I tend to use the scanner for more physical sort of musculoskeletal injuries. I tend to use the bioresonance when it's perhaps more medical, if you like, sort of organ where might need to give some, would normally give perhaps ongoing medication, because then I can obviously do the treatment, but I can also download the results into homeopathic tablets, and then people have got a remedy to use in between, to take home, or I can, do it by post and send them out to them. And then the wave genetics, really, it's a one-off. You do it once, and then people have got it for the rest of their life. Um, and to a certain degree, most people are doing it at the moment because they've got a medical condition that they're trying to target to improve. So it will be individualized to those body systems, but there are also some sort of universal matrices which anybody can use for different body systems, but also very general. So anti-aging. So there's one, anti-aging below the age of 40, one over 40, and then another over 70. Or there's sort of general male or general female, or, and then you've got various different body systems individually. But, but people are using it from the photograph from when they were a baby. They're primarily doing it to try and help them sort of
That's it.
address a medical problem, but also that because they want sort of degree of anti-aging or health maintenance. The sort of, it's all very well living longer, but you want to live healthy.
Exactly. So if we were coming back to, the two types of issues that I was talking about to begin with dogs, so allergies and issues around cataracts and um, glaucoma, etc. So would the scanner or actually would this be a better option as an opportunity to kind of reset the body to the beginning and then work from there to help prevention?
Potentially, I mean, I probably tend to use the bioresonance more for sort of allergies, um, but even before that, the first thing is get the diet right, and you might find a lot of the time is get them on the right food, and again, you might need a few supplements with that. I'm not a great fan of supplements, but sometimes you do need to give a bit of a help. So something like omega-3 oils or quercetin can sometimes help, or the fecal transplant from the microbiome transplant or probiotics. They can help. There are some things that you can, if the symptoms are very severe, you've got to stabilize the situation first. But beyond that, the diet should then sort it out just then a question of how long it takes to do it. I don't see many eyes, to be honest. There's eyes are quite a specialist thing, and if someone does see their dog and they're worried about glaucoma or something, then it can potentially be an emergency where they need to get it stabilized. Uveitis is another one. I've seen it has some good results with horses with uveitis, but on the whole, they've been stabilized by the regular vet first, and then they don't want to keep on the medication. So then we provide a remedy, and then they sort of over time they'll sort of swap over and then find that they're supported with the homeopathy ongoing, or with the bioresonance ongoing. So you do have to sort of do what needs to be done in the moment. But once you've got something that's stabilized, then that's a good time then to sort of think about, well, how can we address this to, for want, try and reverse the condition. The body's a great self-healing mechanism. All we've got to do is push it and point it in the right direction and give it the tools to do it. So to that degree, that's what I try and do. And different individuals will be able to respond to that to different degrees, and it's not always possible to predict, obviously, which ones are going to respond better and which ones are not going to respond quite so well. But on the whole, at least we've tried, and then if you're supporting the body in that way, then actually things have got a potential to reverse. There might always be a weakness there, so if they, especially when they get older and life force gets less and the immune system starts to deteriorate and things like that, then those conditions might well recur, probably because they've got a weakness in that body system. But at least if you've had some good quality life without medication on the way, then at least you can up the dose and try and support it as much as possible with the natural stuff. And people laugh when I say, oh, I always want to die healthy. I don't want years of pain or anything. I want to sort of, get till I'm 120, 150, and then one night just not wake up.
I believe that is a dream shared by many.
It's that thing, is it, that people say, oh, when someone dies, it's in that situation where they've obviously appear to be very healthy and just go, it's a shock to everybody around them, but they are completely oblivious of it themselves. And it's always the same with people who are stupid.
Roger, thank you for a most illuminating and exciting conversation. If people want to find you, how do they do that?
One of my friends once told me if you just Google Roger the Vet, I'm the #1 hit. But but no, seriously, my sort of trading practice name is Natural Healing Solutions. So people Google my, or search for my name, or Natural Healing Solutions, or naturalhealingsolutions.co.uk is my website. And then the Wave Genetics is wavegenetics.co.uk. Then people will usually find me. And then I've got a perhaps more political website where I give my opinions on what's been going on for things like the last few years, and which is just rogermeacock.com. So people can, and from there they'll find everything else that I'm involved with. So I'm fairly easy to find once people know about me and search.
Well, I will make it easier by putting the links in the
Thank you.
box. So thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Hannah. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.
Right.